Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Healthy Moving Podcast, the show that empowers you to exercise less, but move more so you will feel better. I am your healthy moving enthusiast, Jen Hoffman from healthymoving.com. Today's show is all about the intersection between education and movement. I don't know about you, but I grew up learning seated at a desk in a classroom. Well, we have a lot more research now that indicates that learning can be facilitated by movement. I am so excited to have Jean Miller of Waldorf Inspired Learning on the show with me today to really dig in and talk about this topic. Jean and I are going to approach this in the context of homeschooling. Both of us are homeschoolers, and I know we have a ton of homeschoolers in the Healthy Moving community. But even if you are not a homeschooling family, even if you don't have children, I know there's a lot for you to gain from today's episode because we're really going to talk about why learning is facilitated by movement. And this is applicable to anyone who's looking to expand their knowledge on a particular topic. Jean also happens to be a member of my coaching and challenge program. So we're going to end the episode by doing a community insight segment where Jean is going to very generously share some of her own story about how integrating movement into the fabric of her day has helped with some battles she's facing with autoimmune diseases. If you struggle with those, you will want to hear Jean's story. Before I bring Jean on, I also want to let everyone know I have a free class that's available on the topic of how to weave more movement into your homeschool day. If you're a homeschooling family and you want to kind of start to think about how can we make movement more a part of our homeschooling day, then head to healthymoving.com/homeschool, or you can text the word Healthy Moving, all one word, Healthy Moving, to 33444, and I'll send you a link for that free class. Okay, let's get on with the show. I am so excited to bring to you today's episode with one of my personal mentors, Jean Miller. She is the creator and founder of an amazing website called Waldorf Inspired Learning, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, Jean. But I am so incredibly grateful to have you here because you are someone who, as I've told you before, inspires me on an almost daily basis. I think about you and let you give me encouragement to get through my homeschooling day. But we've had some really great conversations, and you've even written a wonderful post for the Healthy Moving blog about movement and education. So I thought today that we could talk a little bit more about the connection between moving our bodies and our kids specifically and their learning and development. And then we can talk a little bit more about some stuff for adults as well. So thank you, Jean, for being here.
Thanks so much, Jen. It's really great to be able to dive into this topic of movement and learning because it's so important, really, for all ages.
So you and I both, we homeschool in a Waldorf-inspired way, which could you just give a quick overview of what Waldorf is all about for people who might not have heard of it before?
Sure. It's a method that was created about 100 years ago by a man named Rudolf Steiner, and it's very hands-on and experiential. So all of the lessons, first their main lesson blocks are taught over a number of weeks. You're really focusing on one subject at a time for a couple of hours or an hour every morning. And the lessons weave in what Steiner called the lively arts, which includes movement and drawing and painting and speech and drama and all kinds of hands-on activities.
And that's one of the things that really, people can have a ton of reasons to homeschool, and all of them are wonderful and valid. And people can have wonderful reasons to send their kids to school outside of the home as well. But for me personally, one of the main reasons why I decided to homeschool and we made it a priority in our family is that of course, I'm a big movement person, and I wanted my kids to grow up really active throughout the day. And I know schools are doing amazing things about incorporating movement in, and there's some wonderful teachers who are working really hard to get movement integrated throughout the day. But I thought as long as it worked for our kids and our family lifestyle, that I would keep them at home so that we could do learning and integrate movement into it, just in the same way that I teach adults to do. And one of the reasons I was attracted to Waldorf is because it wasn't like I was going to have to create a lot of that on my own, that Waldorf so wonderfully blends movement and education, movement and the lesson. You know, they're not separate things. They're really well blended within the Waldorf style.
Yeah, and I so appreciate what you said about there are a lot of schools that are doing some really innovative things. I mean, I've seen pictures of classrooms where every student is on a yoga ball, you know,
Yes.
or where they have these great, you know, long recesses and time outside.
There's
But
a teacher
within-
in our community who she calls them brain breaks, which I absolutely love. She's incorporating little breaks and just little movements like the very same ones that we do in our challenges with her students. I just think that's so amazing and powerful. But can you talk a little bit about kind of what Steiner's motivation was? I mean, we do tons of active math stuff with my daughter, she's doing second grade, and there's active in all of this stuff, but right now we're in a math block, so of course it's what I'm thinking about. But can you talk a little bit about kind of his motivation for the connection between some of this, you know, lively arts and the actual lesson?
Yeah, and I'll just start by saying it's so interesting to me because now neurological science is kind of catching up to what he talked about 100 years ago, and I find that wonderful and fascinating.
Yes, all the sensory integration. If anybody wants to kind of Google some of the research, all the sensory integration and crossing the midlines, like all that kind of stuff is really the neurological science is kind of coming out, like you said, to back some of that up.
Yeah, so I'll start with the Steiner piece, but then I also just want to tell a little bit about my personal story with my own kids and how then those two really came together in such a helpful way for my family. But Steiner, he talked about, he came up with this idea of the lively arts, the 7 lively arts actually, and the phrase actually comes from the 7 liberal arts from ancient times. So think ancient Egypt, right, and ancient Greece, and what their definition of a really learned person was to study these 7 liberal arts. And there are things like, you know, astronomy and geometry and rhetoric and things like that. And that was their definition of a learned human being, right, to study those 7 subjects. Well, Steiner then, so fast forward to the 1900s and early 1900s, and Steiner said that what he saw in classrooms all over Europe, he was in Germany in the early 1900s, was that those same liberal arts were taught, and that his observation was that the students were really bored and the material was really dry. They were using textbooks, and there was like, you know, the creative spark just wasn't there in most classrooms. And so and this is post-World War I, and so in Germany, of course, there was a huge move to restructure the country and bring lots of cultural and social renewal to the country because it had been so decimated by the war. And so he came up with this idea of the lively arts, and his concept was that the lively arts bring us joy and they make the learning memorable. So those were his 2 basic foundational premises. The lively arts bring us joy and they make the learning memorable. And now, as I said, the neurological science and the research is proving that that's true.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your experience in your family with that.
Yeah, so I was listening recently to your podcast, There Are No Shortcuts, the one where you talk about difficult seasons in life, and it took me back to one of those moments in my parenting when my boys, so I have boy, boy, girl. I have 3 kids, and the first 2, the boys are 16 months apart. For anyone who's experienced that, you just
Bless
know
you. Yes.
what that's like. So I had one of those slide down the wall into a heap of tears moments when my boys were 3 and 4 years old. I was teaching part-time, and they were at home with me, and then, someone else was at work. And I had a realization that, I was tired. I was teaching junior high kids English, so I had papers to grade, all these things. And I just realized I had not been given compliant, easily teachable children. And my oldest, I will say, that he fell into could have been in a whole category of labels. So ADHD, autism spectrum, behavior problem, however you want to define it. So I had to do some work, take a deep breath, be grateful for the children I had been given in this lifetime, and begin to explore what they needed.
Yes.
I'm reminded of Simplicity Parenting. Kim John Payne has written a great book, Simplicity Parenting, for those who haven't read it. And one of his great quotes is, "There is no such thing as a disobedient child, only a disoriented child."
Yes, I love that.
So, yeah, it's so great. So love the children before you and look at what they need. And so what I realized was that they really need movement. They need more activity. I live in northeastern Ohio, and it's really easy to be outside in the summer for 3 of the 4 seasons, and in the winter it's much more challenging unless there's snow, because then you can play, right?
Right.
But if it's just cold and gray and frozen, it's hard to get outside all the time. So we really needed to find something that had a lot of movement and hands-on activity, and that's when I discovered Waldorf, and we decided to homeschool because I knew my oldest would not be well-suited for. I went and observed in preschools about every February for 3 years. But I knew it wasn't going to work, and so I think what I realized was lots and lots and lots and lots of movement in so many ways. And really, my oldest, he just wasn't fully in his body yet. He was challenged. He was challenged spatially and in all sorts of ways, and that affected his learning. So some things that just helped so much were the Waldorf curriculum, where everything is just built in. We'd start our day with verse memorization and beanbag games and marching around the dining room table reciting verses or singing, and that just helped a lot. And then I had to learn how to not feel compelled all the time to say, stop, sit still,
I talked about that very thing recently in a class that I was teaching, because I'm a person who advocates listening to your body's signals, and your body gives you nudges to move. And then here I am as a parent. I have this idea, this lesson plan that I want to get through. And when my daughter is fidgety, when she's really having a hard time, and we don't typically sit at a table, usually we're on the floor, which is great in a lot of respects, but on the floor, it lends itself to a lot of wiggling and movement around. So she'll and I still have this kind of voice creep up in my head that says, we have to get through this lesson, tell her to sit still. And, kind of this, I feel myself getting, harsh and wanting her to do that. But I've shared before that while I think it's really good and important to teach children the power of stillness, 100%. And in my homeschool curriculum, I have an entire block specifically on stillness and teaching them the power of stillness and focus. But I just think that so often we are not teaching them the power of that by barking at them to do it, and instead we're teaching them to ignore what their body's telling them. I believe their body calls for stillness at times, gives them that nudge for stillness, but we have to try to kind of channel that. And as parents, whether it's that we're homeschooling parents or whether it's that we're just, parents and our kids go away to school, we have to really be mindful of the messages we're sending them about paying attention to their own body and what their own body is asking for. And it requires so much creativity and thinking outside the box and thinking in a new way, but it's so powerful and so important.
It's so important. And what I often say to parents who I am mentoring is that, we want to invite them in a positive direction, like you say, to learn to be still more and that sort of thing. But we really have to start where they are.
Yes, we do.
Because if we just come at them head on, we create a power struggle all on our own.
Yes.
And so it is tricky as parents, as teachers. And I think there's a lot that we can do if we're homeschooling within the lessons, and then also as parents and homeschoolers outside of the lessons. So I had to learn to, it was okay to ride your trike in the basement. It was okay to bring a sandbox inside. It was okay to, things that in my head, as a new parent, no, it's all going to be under control, and they're going to do exactly what I say. But, you have to really learn that, as Kim John Payne said, if they're disoriented, it's my job to change something.
Yeah, yes. And that we can do that. I think we're afraid oftentimes that if we do that, if we help them be oriented, that we'll be disoriented. And I think that we ourselves as the parents, that it's going to create some disorder for us. And I think the beautiful thing of relationships and families is figuring out how to all be oriented together. And what powerful, world-changing people would we be raising if we modeled that for them? How to figure out how to get everybody's needs met. And I just think so often we think they have to sacrifice their needs so that we can have ours, or vice versa, when really kind of coming to this place where we all figure out how to do it together. So powerful.
Yeah, and I always say that our goal, we have to find a way that this works, keeps us all happy.
Yes.
And is acceptable, right, to all of us.
Exactly.
So, and that's one of the amazing things about Waldorf education is that I think it's, especially as a homeschooler, it's a journey for the parent as much as it is for the children. And everything too. I mean, the whole curriculum is set up to give balance and resilience and teach self-regulation. Yes. And it has definitely done that for me as well as my children. I mean, that challenging child is now 26, and, he's been through college and graduate school and has a job, and people now pay him to come up with really creative, hands-on ideas. Exactly. I put in the dedication of my homeschool physical education curriculum, the dedication says that it's to Alice, Max, and Spencer, my movers and shakers. And then I think I said something like, most days, I'm not sure who's teaching who. And I wouldn't have it any other way, because I really feel like I learn as much, I grow as much, I develop as much from them and from the process. It's such a blessing. But speaking of that, I just wanted to add to say that that whole concept of sit still, power through, even if you aren't a parent, if you're listening and you're kind of thinking about that, we as grownups, we tend to do that to ourselves as well. So maybe it's a problem that you're trying to fix at work. So you're sitting at your computer and you're just trying to hammer through, or maybe it's, some kind of relationship, emotional challenge or something, but we oftentimes will kind of pin ourselves down physically. Like we'll try to just stay in one place and power through and really fix something. Or if you're having a difficult conversation with someone, you'll just feel like staying there and continuing to hash it out, or whatever thing is challenging for you. We feel afraid of walking away, afraid of kind of getting in our body, getting physical, like standing up and walking away. But I have seen, and I've heard from so many of my students over and over and over again, that
if you are struggling with something, if you stand up, I teach a couple of different exercises. I teach a lot of exercises that you can stand up and just do as a 2-minute break. Sometimes people will say that they get up and go for a walk around the block, or even a walk around the house or the office, even inside, or they just get up and do a quick stretch or something. And it changes, I believe that it changes the way our brain works. It helps open up new ideas and new creative patterns that if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you're repeating something over and over and you can't solve the problem that's before you, getting up and moving around. It doesn't have to be a formal exercise. It can be just standing up and stretching. Anything that works for you is extremely powerful. If you practice it yourself and you get really good at it yourself, then you'll be able to help the other people in your life as well, whether it's other adults or the children who you're blessed to be around in your life as well. That this concept that movement and our life are separate. Movement and the things we have to do, whether that's learning, whether that's working, whether that's cooking dinner. The blending of all of this benefits us on so many levels. I just think it's extremely powerful. And of course, there's other benefits besides just the physical, the benefits of brain stuff. I know, Jean, I'd love to transition, if you're willing, to talking a little bit about, and I want to get you on a future episode to talk more about this, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what it's been like for you to blend more movement into your life and what have been some of the benefits that you've seen from that.
Yeah, sure. And definitely a whole nother conversation to be had. But what I will say is that I have that tendency to make myself sit still and power through. Okay, that's sort of I was very well trained in that.
Yes.
And I do it to myself all the time. And then about 12 years ago, I was diagnosed with my first autoimmune disease, and then I have a second diagnosis as well. And that totally changed everything because I really wanted to be able to continue homeschooling, and I would go through, when I have a flare, I go through months of not really being able to do much at all.
Yeah.
And movement has saved me. So there are two pieces to it. I know that when I go through a flare, if I literally just lay in bed all day or on the couch all day, which is what I feel like doing, I don't get well as quickly. And we know this about older people too, right? I remember the last flare, we had an older uncle who was in his 90s, and he fell and then was in the hospital, and they weren't getting him up and moving enough, and he just got sicker and sicker and sicker.
Yes.
So that movement and your program, Jen, have actually really made a huge difference in my life, getting well from my last flare. And then the flip side is that so that I don't hit my wall and have my body, sort of fall apart, I need to build in little breaks all the time throughout my day. So, because that's what keeps me healthy.
Yes, it's both. I've heard that in the past. It helps when you are in a flare, but it helps prevent them as well if you can get into a really good routine. Could you tell us what one of your favorite exercises that you've learned in the Healthy Moving challenges, one of your favorite ones is?
So many. So I'm going to tell you two, because right now, while we're talking, I've been at my standing desk doing calf stretches.
Yes.
So my standing desk is huge, and I love looking out my window at my backyard and the garden and the apple tree. So I'm a real outdoorsy person. My other one is, and I have this list to help homeschooling moms. It's called What to Do When All Seems Lost.
Oh, that's great.
The number one thing on the list is go outside.
Yes. Oh, and yes.
So doing the arm swinging on my walk, and being aware of the whole healthy alignment thing helps me breathe in a way that when I go out for a walk, that just calms my brain down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me explain to everybody what you're talking about with the arm swing. So as we're walking, all walking is not the same. And we want to be walking in a way that's using the most amount of muscles and generating the optimal amount of flow, putting the least amount of wear and tear in our joints, building bone density, all that kind of stuff. But most of us, if we've been sitting for a long time, we kind of bring that sitting self who's maybe stuck in certain places to our walking. And one of the things that can happen is specifically with our arms. If we spend a lot of time at the computer, then when we get up to go walking, we might have internally rotated arms. So the first thing to do that's so simple is to look at your elbow pit, fancy technical anatomical term there, but the line on the inside of your elbow. If it's pointing to your side body, then your arm is internally rotated. So we want to see if from the upper arm you can externally rotate till that line is pointing forward. So it's facing the same direction that you're looking. And then keeping that there, you want to turn your palm so that it's facing in toward your body. Then from there, that might be just enough to just focus on that for a little while. But what Jean was talking about with respect to the arm swing is that as you're walking, your arms, you should have what's called reciprocal arm swing, where whichever foot is back, that arm is forward, and then reverse. So the arms swing opposite to the feet. It's part of how you balance as you're walking. And we want the arms to be lengthened, and then we want the movement in the arms to be behind the body. So the best way I can think to explain this to people is if you think about the action of skiing. You push back with your arm, you put the pole in the ground and push back in order to propel yourself forward. Or even with oaring, an oar in the water in a canoe or something, you put the oar in the water and then you push back. So when your elbow pit is forward and your palm is facing towards your body, as you're walking, you push that arm back behind you. And then any forward motion of the arm is just gravity and momentum. So once you push back, you let go and the arm drops and comes forward. The tricky thing, and I love that you pointed out about how it connects you with your breath, is that as you push your arm back, you don't want to push your ribs forward. You want to keep your ribs in neutral so your sternum is vertical as you're walking, and that'll help really open up the muscles of respiration as you're walking. It's so powerful. I love that you brought that one up, Jean.
Yeah, thank you for describing it too, because I just do it now,
Yes, it's one of your motor programs.
It is, and that's been such a huge benefit of your program, the Coaching and Challenge program. And I just will end by saying that word flow, I think, is such an important thing, because when we're well integrated or balanced or grounded or whatever you want to call it, life just does flow. And just to bring it back to Steiner and Waldorf education, that was his whole concept for movement. So this idea of circle time or warm-up time before we start the lesson, he described it, and he did it with his adult teachers, the very first Waldorf teacher training. He did this, where the movement and the verse recitation, the intention behind them are to regulate the breathing.
Yes.
That's the idea. That's what gets us ready. That's what helps us get, calms our mind and helps to prepare us for the work, whatever comes next.
Love that. And it's so applicable, whether you are a parent educating kids, whether you're just a parent of children, or whether you are not a parent at all. That is so powerful. We have so kind of divorced movement and the connection between our mind and our body. It's just part of our modern culture that we're really not in our body and not appreciating the connection between those two. And I love how you said that, Jean. That's so beautiful and inspirational and so powerful for all of us, young and, I'm not going to say old, less young. How about that?
Less young.
Jean, thank you so incredibly much. Can you tell people, I want to put a link in the show notes to a couple of the things, like you've written some amazing blog posts for the Healthy Moving blog, and then also some that are on your site as well. I want to put some links to those in the show notes so you guys can find those at healthymovingpodcast.com. And I'll put links to where they can find you, but could you share as well where people can find you?
Absolutely. So WaldorfInspiredLearning.com is my site, and I have a couple of blog posts, one about movement and making beanbags, another one that Jen mentioned on her Healthy Moving site, and then I'm on Facebook and Pinterest too. So come have a look at WaldorfInspiredLearning.com, and I would love to meet you and see you there.
Awesome. Jean, thank you so much. This has been wonderful to chat with you. I really appreciate it. And I definitely want to have you. Everybody can keep a lookout. I'm going to hold Jean to it, and we're going to have her come back on and talk a little bit more about autoimmune stuff, because I think that's powerful, and so many people are battling that. So I think you can really offer some great inspiration there as well, Jean.
Thank you so much, Jen. This has been really fun.
Thank you, Jean, so much for joining me. I'm going to put links for how to connect with Jean, how to get access to all the links and resources that we talked about, plus some further reading, and definitely include that link for that free Healthy Moving Homeschool class, all over in the show note at healthymovingpodcast.com. Thank you so very much for joining me. If you enjoy the show, I would really appreciate it if you would head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review. It takes just a couple of minutes to do those things, and it means so much to me. It gives me valuable feedback, and it helps other people find the podcast. All the instructions for doing that can be found at healthymoving.com/iTunes. Also, if you know someone who could benefit from today's message, please feel free to share them a link. All the sharing links are also over at healthymovingpodcast.com. I so appreciate you doing that. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep moving.